Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 13th of February 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, the Wildman Kickstarter has been cancelled, and the future of the developer looks uncertain. We'll be finding out a little bit more about gas-powered games later in the show. Anodyne dev claims it's better to embrace piracy as his game pops up on the Pirate Bay and then mysteriously disappears. And GameStop claims that 60% of customers would not buy a next-generation console that blocks used games. In the latest video update on the Wildman Kickstarter, Chris Taylor has spoken about the cancellation of the project. It had about 4 days left to go, and unfortunately also required about $600,000 of its $1.1 million Kickstarter goal, which made reaching it look rather unlikely to say the least. As a result, Chris Taylor has cancelled the campaign and posted an update video on Kickstarter which indicated that the campaign had been cancelled not because it was about to fall flat on its face, but as a result of opportunities that had happened behind the scenes, which may allow gas-powered games to continue running in the way that Chris actually wants it to. So this is potentially good news. Of course, it could also just be about avoiding the imminent failure of the Kickstarter in the first place and putting out good vibes and trying to at least generate a little bit of confidence. It's hard to say. This is the kind of situation where we're not going to really know much until he decides to announce something. He's claimed that as a result of the Kickstarter and the attention that the game actually got, that there are some opportunities which have presented themselves which weren't there before. So that was as a direct result of the Kickstarter, so Chris Taylor claims. And he says he's going to try and share those results, hopefully within the next few weeks, so I guess we'll find out. Lord knows as to whether or not Wildman will ever actually come out, or whether or not this is support for something completely different. Prior to this Kickstarter even going out, Chris Taylor very much doubted the future of the company and was talking about a transition to a much smaller, more sustainable business model, which may or may not have involved casual gaming and things like that. So it's hard to say. It really, really is. And it's kind of a shame that this thing didn't make it to its goal. It looked alright. The problem is, of course, that he was asking for money for yet another action RPG. Now, if he'd done that a couple of years back, people would have jumped at it, especially if it happened to have Chris Taylor's name on it. Unfortunately, he's in a situation where actually we've got quite a lot of those now. We've got Diablo 3, we've got Torchlight, we have, of course, Grim Dawn coming, we've got Path of Exile, and a number of other games that have popped up. And honestly, I don't really feel the need for another action RPG now, which, even though it's an interesting concept, the notion that it's kind of prehistoric, even then, I don't know if I really felt the need to have it, but I'm interested to see where this goes. I don't want gas-powered games to shut down, because Chris Taylor's actually been at the helm of a lot of games that I've very much enjoyed, including, of course, the Dungeon series games, Total Annihilation, the original Supreme Commander before he ruined it in Subcom 2, and so on and so forth. So we'll see how that one turns out. Now, Chris Taylor had a few other things to say about Kickstarter, actually, at the Casual Connect Europe event, which was in Hamburg this week. And he said that Kickstarter is starting to wear itself out. It's a numbers game, and someone has lightning in a bottle. The business is really, really tough. It's turning into a lottery business unless you work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and study gaming for decades. Now, I don't really know if Kickstarter's actually starting to wear itself out. I don't think there's really any evidence of that. We're still seeing an awful lot of successful Kickstarters. The notion of Kickstarter fatigue's been around for a long time, right? It's been around pretty much since the Double Fine Adventure Kickstarter happened. Everyone then suddenly said, oh, it's Kickstarter fatigue. I don't know about that. I mean, I'm seeing all sorts of crazy stuff getting kickstarted. I'm looking right now at a Kickstarter for Jiva, the coffee cubes and hot chocolate cubes, which has been funded to 159% with 16 days to go. Just a little kickstarted project. Science ruining everything since 1543, an SMBC collection. That is 1000% funded. Good lord, it's absolutely insane. A touchscreen Wi-Fi router and smart home hub called the Almond Plus, 185% funded with $500,000 pledged, and so on and so forth. Things continue to work out pretty well for a lot of Kickstarters. The question, I suppose, is it burning out on the gaming front? Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm looking at the Kickstarter for Dreamfall Chapters, The Longest Journey right now. 25 days left. This thing is at $704,000, trending towards $4.3 million if it keeps going at this rate. Now, obviously, this is based on kick-track data. This may very well not end up panning out the way that they actually expect it will, but even then, That's an impressive amount. And we're talking about a sequel here to a well-loved but otherwise fairly cult adventure game. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great, but I mean, would you have expected that kind of success? There are plenty of other things which are doing really well on Kickstarter as well. Unwritten, that which happened, has hit its goal with 2 hours remaining as I record this. That's looking pretty good. There were doubts about that for a while, but about 2/3 of the way through the campaign, it got a real boost and started to gain momentum, so that's another gaming project that has been successful. Recently, we've had the Game Stick and, of course, the Ouya console earn an absurd amount of money. I don't know about that. We'll see. I don't think we really have actually hit the Kickstarter fatigue thing as of yet. I think the problem is we don't have as many projects that really capture the imagination. When it does happen, you get a huge swelling of support. Massive. Dreamfall Chapters is a prime example of that. This is going to be huge by the looks of it. This is going to be one of the most successful video game Kickstarters of all time if it keeps rolling at the rate that it is. And think about the stuff that's been really successful. A classic adventure game from Double Fine. Who the hell didn't want that? Wasteland 2. Yeah? You're pretty much talking about a return to the roots of what inspired Fallout in the first place. What else have we got? The Shadowrun game. Who the hell didn't want Shadowrun? There was a lot of support behind that kind of idea. Essentially another Black Isle game. From the guys that brought you all of the good stuff back in the day, Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment. Backed by the legends in the industry. These are the kind of really successful Kickstarters I'm talking about here. Now, when you have an existing company come to Kickstarter, having released quite a few games in the past, and say, we want to make a new game, but would like you to pay for it, somehow people don't really get as excited by that. And I don't know about you, but if I were to compare Project Eternity to Wildman, not even close in terms of how interested I am in that. I think if you want to be really successful on Kickstarter, you've got to come with a really unique concept, and you've got to come with a good premise from the start. And I don't feel Wildman did that as well as it could have. It played a lot on sympathy, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. And I don't want to see GPG go under either, but I don't think many people were actually all that interested in Wildman. They were more interested in GPG not going under. Whereas people were very interested in Double Fine Adventure, Project Eternity, Wasteland 2, and so on and so forth, and are interested now in Dreamfall. So that's Kickstarter for you. I don't think it's as complicated as people claim it is. People really want stuff that the market currently isn't providing, and that doesn't include an action RPG. The developer of the indie title Anodyne, Sean Hogan, has given his approval to pirates on the Pirate Bay in terms of an illegal download of his title, and has even given download codes for the actual game itself and posted them on the Pirate Bay. Speaking on the subject, he said that piracy is inevitable, so it's better to embrace it. Plus, it gives a lot of people who couldn't normally afford the game the opportunity to actually play it. And he then went on to say that, I think that when you're a small group of developers, that being only him and his friend John Kitaka, it's better to have lots of people able to experience your game. We hope enough people will like it and the word gets out, eventually allowing us to get onto Steam via the Greenlight system. This mirrors the opinions of Jonathan Soderstrom, who is responsible for Hotline Miami and was actually providing tech support for pirated versions of the game which weren't working properly, claiming that he just wanted people to play the game, and if they were gonna pirate it, he might as well allow them to experience the game in the way that it was intended. And I think there's plenty of situations where you can sort of embrace the pirates, as it were, and actually get some PR out of it. And that's the most important thing, isn't it? Some people will convert their game piracy to a purchase here because they feel that this guy's done right by them. That could happen. A lot of people won't, but some will. So think about it for a second. What can you do as an indie dev to stop the piracy? Not a bloody thing, right? Even major multinational companies cannot stop piracy. So why the hell can you and your friend in your bedroom coding away stop piracy? You can't do that unless you want to start issuing code books again. It's really not going to happen. So I think this is really smart because, honestly, in this situation, there was no downside to it. And it's got a ton of publicity. I mean, this ended up on gamesindustry.biz. It was upvoted, I think, to the front page on Reddit. It really was all over the place. And it's a very pragmatic and a very practical kind of view. And it honestly makes sense to do things in this way rather than getting upset that your game gets pirated. Make use of it. Try and see if you can turn it into a marketing opportunity. I think that this is much, much easier for indies to do, certainly. And this kind of publicity is absolutely huge for them, whereas if you had EA turn around and do it, it's like, oh, EA just said we can pirate your stuff, no problem, let's get on there, right? Yeah, it doesn't sound like a very, very good idea to me, but if it's gonna happen, you may as well turn it to your advantage, which is what Sean Hogan has done there. I don't really know if this is going to continue to work. I mean, we've already seen 2 indie games get success, partially as a result of this. If this keeps happening, then people are just going to say, oh, well, what's the point in buying indie games? It seems like every dev on the planet just wants to give it away for free anyway, so I might as well not pay for it, right? So you've got to do this in moderation. I don't think we're going to see 2 more success stories as a result of this, but it's good for the Anodyne guys, absolutely. Really happy that they seem to be getting some success out of that, and particularly cunning, of course, to ask folks to vote for them on Greenlight, because, of course, that presence on Steam alone is at least a guarantee of some sales. The CFO of GameStop, Rob Lloyd, speaking at the Goldman Sachs Technology and Internet Conference, which literally sounds like the most unpleasant thing in the world, has claimed that the number of people that would not purchase a next-generation console that did not allow used games is somewhere around 60% based on their research and surveys that they have conducted. He went on to claim that only about 4% of GameStop's used game sales are games that were released in the last 60 days, and is at this point concerned about Microsoft, since according to Rob Lloyd, Sony has publicly said that they don't intend to block used games on its next console, whereas Microsoft has refused to or has not commented on the rumors. I've got to say I can't actually find a source for this. I have looked all over the place, and as of yet, I haven't managed to stumble across any information that would indicate that this is actually true one way or the other. The only thing I've managed to find is a bunch of rumors that say that the Xbox 720 will not support used games, rather than an explicit statement by Sony that clearly says, no, it's fine, the PlayStation 4 will be allowed to play used games. So it's definitely an odd one, to say the least, especially, of course, since we know that Sony has patented technology in order to try and prevent this from happening in the first place, although rumors have it that this is for Blu-rays and movies as opposed to actual games themselves. Now, needless to say, GameStop is very much on the side of used games. Why would they not be? More than half their profits come from that. Obviously, they have a very high margin on used games. Everything that does games used has a high margin. Every store, every franchise, every company that does it, of course they have a high margin. That's kind of the point, right? It is buy low, sell high once again, and when it comes to newer titles, you can very much just knock $5 off it, and that might actually be enough for some people. In fact, it's enough for a lot of people to say, oh, I saved $5, that's great. What do you mean that I'm not actually supporting the developer? I don't care about that. It's all good. Now, it is an interesting figure, assuming this is true, that 96% of their used game sales are games that were not released in the last 60 days. So, we're talking about older titles, we're talking about stuff that comes out the same year, and so on and so forth. It's a really odd figure as well, because you would think that there'd be a lot more new sales of stuff like that. And it might sound a little bit odd, of course, but the sales cycle of those kind of titles still means that they're on the shelf. Usually they get a big discount. Instead of being a $60 game, it's a $40, then a $30, then a $20, then there's a re-release in Platinum, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of weird that you would see so many used game sales of older games like that. Obviously, for some games, you have to buy it used, because there's just no way to get it new, but that's increasingly becoming a thing of the past thanks to more digital sales and things like that. And obviously, as a Steam user, I find the whole thing completely mind-boggling. It's like, oh, why would I go and buy a used game? It's probably going to be at the Steam sale for $3 tomorrow, right? I mean, Christ, why would I even bother? It's a rather odd number. It's quite surprising. But I think what makes this whole discussion really interesting is what's going to happen if these guys decide to play a game of chicken. And there are advantages and disadvantages to releasing a console that supports or blocks used game sales. Now, if both consoles block used game sales, I think you're going to be in a seriously horrible place. Really bad for consumers, could potentially cause the next console crash. Who the hell knows? But I have a feeling, and it is based on these rumors, of course, that only one console's going to do that. And that puts the market in a really weird place. You've got one console that is anti-consumer. At least in the sense of you can't play used games on it. Some people are going to get very, very pissed off about that. And you think, well, that's going to be the one that loses, right? Not necessarily. It's really, really easy to say, this will cause the death of your console, but in reality, what you're not taking into account is just how many publishers and developers would support that machine. And you might think, well, why would they do that? Nobody's going to buy it. Yeah, they probably will. For one thing, it might have a slow start, but chances are it'll get adoption. And what will really allow it to have adoption is if a ton of publishers and devs say, oh, used game sales are a thing of the past? Wonderful. That means we can make more money on our games, so we're going to make our games for your system and not the other one. And at that point, it becomes really hard to argue with the concept of buying that machine because all the good games are being put on that one and not on the other one. And then you end up in a horrible situation like the Wii versus the 360 or the PS3 where you don't get those good games on the Wii because people know that they're not going to sell enough. Hey, think about it for a second. You might think, oh, well, that sucks. 60% less people will own our system, at least according to GameStop research. That's terrible. We would never make games for that. But how many of the people that will bought used games in the first place? Bear in mind, of course, that a used game could sell to 1, 2, 3, 4, however many people. They all get to play the same game, and yet only one person has actually paid for it. Think about the possible profits there. And think about what happens if all of those really good devs, the AAAs, all start making games exclusively for that system. How many people are going to be able to resist it? I'll tell you, I wouldn't resist it because I don't buy used games. I mean, to me, it's not all that interesting. I understand that used games are important for some people because obviously they don't have that much money, but I buy my games new. I've pretty much always bought my games on PC, so I haven't had access to used games for ages, right? And with digital distribution, the risk of not being able to find a game anymore disappears. I mean, it's going to be on Xbox Live or PlayStation Network. I can just buy it. And I don't have to worry about rare PC games anymore. We've got Steam, we've got GOG. I can just get a copy whenever I want. There's no limit of shelf space there. So be very wary of the really interesting dynamic that's going to be coming in this direction if we have one console that supports used software and one that doesn't. That's a really, really interesting clash of style and business model. I wonder where it's going. Alright folks, that does me for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Content Patch, and I'll see you next time.